I'm getting better, maybe, and more relaxed, maybe, at letting go and surrendering and literally allowing whatever is happening to happen instead of tension and constriction to like, no, I don't want to change. And it's like, change is normal and it's coming. And when you embrace it, at least in my experience, it always seems to bring something much better and bigger and that you could have ever dreamt of.
Monica is a research associate professor in evolutionary ecology at Southern Cross University, where she directs the Biological Intelligence Lab. She's pioneered the brand new research field of bioacoustics in plants, for the first time demonstrating that plants emit their own voices and detect and respond to the sounds of their environments. By rekindling a sense of wonder for this beautiful place we call home, she's helping to create a fresh imaginative ecology of mind that can inspire solutions to human relations with the world we co-inhabit. Her latest book is Thus Spoke the Plant. In this episode, we talk about how Monica discovered that there's no scientific question big enough to justify taking another's life, and the incredible moment of crisis which heralded big change and dismantled her idea of science, and how plants came to rescue the scientist within her. You're listening to Going Conscious, the podcast where we discover new ways to live a more conscious life of fulfillment and freedom. Each week, I speak with entrepreneurs, academics, and changemakers who have made big transformations, left unfulfilling lives behind, and found meaning in this new world where purpose drives success. Let's get inspired to live our unique journeys to the fullest. Let's explore the impact we want to make and deepen our understanding of ourselves, each other, and this beautiful world around us. Live your freedom. I'm your host, Nikki Trott. Monica and I were introduced by our mutual friend Janet Lawrence, who I previously interviewed on an earlier episode of Going Conscious. I'm fascinated by Monica's work and was excited to connect with her. She lives in Australia, just by where I spent the first half of this year, beautiful land with stunning nature and openness. We talk about how to surrender to and embrace change, the lessons we can learn from plants, how cognition is a process, how to be able to ask disruptive questions, the humbleness and awe of plant time, being comfortable with not knowing, Monica's new field of bioacoustics, what it means for the regeneration of the environment, the aliveness of those we cohabit the planet with, and giving up purpose to find purpose. Now let's go to our conversation. Welcome to Going Conscious, Monica. I'm really looking forward to discovering more about plant cognition and about your work and also about your journey today.
Thank you, Nikki, for having me. Yeah, nice to be here.
Thank you. So firstly, I wanted to ask about your experience transitioning from a marine biologist to, well, what I've read, and feel free to correct me, but to deciding that you never wanted to kill an animal again for science.
That's right. Well, I was trained as a marine ecologist, and I actually did my training in the UK and also some other places. And then I did my PhD on the Great Barrier Reef. So I had an incredible opportunity to work in probably one of the most beautiful places in the world, and spending months underwater every day, all day, and working with coral reef fishes, especially those that, the typical, I guess, idea that many of us have of like colorful, pretty, like small, fluffing around on the reef and making what the coral reefs are to us as, the human observer. The colorful fish make it what the reef is, like pretty and interesting. At least superficially, that's the truth. But and then it's because of my attention to the fish and because of my time spent in the water with these fish in particular. Yeah, at one point I had this experience, I guess, of real connection with this other who clearly, from my experience, knew much more about me than I knew about myself. And little I knew that it was about to change my life, because when I realized that my fish knew exactly what I was doing, and I was still engaging in my science just as I was trained, very much as I'm the objective, detached observer here, and I can do things without my presence here doesn't really matter. And the fish obviously was like, you must be kidding. I know exactly what you're here for. I know exactly who you are, and you're the one that is mistaken, very much so. If you think that you don't matter. Yeah, and I mattered so much in the picture that at the end I had to change my mind about my whole science. And at one point I realized that maybe that was the end of my science, that I couldn't do anymore if my science required what we say in technical terms, we say like you mainly euthanized, but really it's like killing for taking body parts, and a lot of the science in animal actually does that, and not all of it, but a lot of it does that, and certainly my science did that. And it became clear that it was no longer sustainable, but not for any particular reason except like I don't have, and I don't think there is, a scientific question that is important enough, big enough, whatever enough to justify me killing and taking someone else's life, no matter what form this life is in. And so, there was a real moment of crisis, which often heralds big change in all of our lives. And mine required the dismantling of my idea of what the scientist is and who the scientist in me was, and how can I be a scientist without being what I was. And in the end, I guess, as I said many other times before, like I think the plants came to rescue the scientist in me because I really thought, okay, I have to be creative now and just think of what am I going to do next? I'm no longer a scientist, so what am I going to do next? And then the plants in my garden were like, well, don't go so fast. You can, you can work with us and you can take samples from us, and that doesn't kill us. You can work with us and we can teach you a lot. And 10 years later or more, here we are working with plants and slowly returning to my marine animals as well, which is something that I'm going to be hopefully integrating back into my research very soon. But my research and my approach and methodology have changed so fundamentally that, I think the kind of science that I will do, even with animals again, it's very, very different than what I was trained and I have done for many years at the beginning of my career.
Incredible. Was there one moment that led you to make this shift?
It was a big moment because, you see, I was in the field and I remember that I was running this experiment for something like 3 months. And as I said, every day in the water with these animals, interacting and observing and learning about them, and to the point that, you know them at the individual level. It's like, oh, this is, and of course, for the sake of science, we number them. So it's like, this is number 3 and this is number 5 and this is number 21. And number 3 is very chill out dude. Number 5 is a bit schizo, and they got their own personality, and you get to know them, right? And I guess similarly, they know you, but that's not a knowledge that they actually are learning you too. And then at one point, when the experiment was supposed to finish as per protocol, I was supposed to collect them all and kill them all to take the samples. And in that morning, I remember going in the water and I really felt I was going just to say goodbye. And so I didn't carry any nets or anything except the inside. I was already carrying the idea that I'm coming back this afternoon and I'm going to come and take you all. And these are fish that after 3 months of seeing each other every day, they would come and basically sit in my hand. And I could even close a little bit my hand around them and they would not be afraid because they knew, oh, this is just Monica. She comes every day and she comes and look at us and then she goes. And but this time, that morning, that didn't happen. No one single fish came out of that little hidey hole. They were all very afraid and they were all like looking at me as if Monica today is bad news. Monica is not the same Monica that was here all these other few days that we've seen her. And she's not good. And I guess, there was that moment of feeling right into my body, this knowing. It's like they know, and I haven't even said anything or shown anything except that I carry that knowing and they can read me. They know. And so I guess when I came out of the water, it was very confusing. But as I've learned over the years, as we do, I guess, in general, I did exactly all that I knew. So I didn't stop. I just carried on, or tried to carry on business as usual. Nothing is happening. I can, and it will be all fine, and we all go back to normal. And so I just went in the next in the afternoon, and I collected them and take them all, and had my little data set and published a paper and whatever else. And but the experience did happen, and that interaction was so profound that it already had changed me, even if I was in denial, even if I was trying to stick with the normal. Sounds a little familiar with some of the responses that we're seeing today with the situation with the COVID. It's just people wanting to just return to normal. It's like the change has already happened, and the normal that we're thinking of doesn't exist anymore. But because we are growing, and so it's good that it doesn't exist anymore. It's good that we are not going back. We are going forward, and so for me, it took a while, and then when it became clear, it was actually during I went to a meditation retreat for 10 days in silence, and in the middle of the retreat, I had one day in which I started just crying, and I just felt all of the blood that I've shed from all the years of research, and not the guilt, but the feeling sorry for not understanding what I was doing, for not knowing what I was really doing. And once I came back out of that retreat, I decided that I was going to become vegetarian, so that would be my compromise until I could work out how to do my research without having to kill. And that's when then the plant came to the rescue, and it was like, it's okay. We can do it in a different way. And so I guess also if one wants to see this, I see this pattern repeated in my life over and over again. It's just I'm getting better, maybe, and more relaxed, maybe, at letting go and surrendering and literally allowing whatever is happening to happen, instead of tension and constriction to like, no, I don't want to change. And it's like, change is normal and it's coming. And when you embrace it, at least in my experience, it always seems to bring something much better and bigger and that you could have ever dreamt of. So I'm getting better, I think, at entering that space and allowing for change to take me wherever I need to go. So, and in this case, the change took me to the plants. And then, yeah, as you know, I've been working with them and they've been working with me, and we've been changing each other and helping each other since.
Wow. So this process of allowing change and surrendering to it, how do you help yourself to get better and better at that?
Oh, the plants help me. I wouldn't claim to be like a self-mastery doesn't mean that you have to do it alone. So the plants help me a lot, and I engage with them in many ways and on many levels, and especially for the last 2 years in particular, but also before. But the last 2 years has been very regular and very kind of normalized in my life. I do a proper ceremony at least once a month, sometimes more, where I sit with some of these plants, and literally it's like as if I'm having this big meeting. So for a few hours, I sit in ceremony with these plants, and I ask, whatever it is that I need to learn, I'm here and I'm listening. Yeah, and just recently, for example, a few months ago, in this case was the cacao, which I love very much and I've been working with for, well over 10 years. And the cacao, there was a lot of stress in my life at that moment and related to work. And I was like finding it difficult to, relax into what was happening. And the cacao literally just say, you just need to be unconcerned. And of course, I know that this sounds like, but then you had to do it. It's like, but because of that information was coming through ceremony, and because ceremony is nothing else but a very focused, intentional space that you create where you are giving 100% your attention and your presence and your devotion to that space, where you meet this other, which in fact is just you again. And so the cacao did something for me that in that space, that it was like, here is how it feels to be unconcerned. And literally it feels like almost like a switch got, flicked on. And I finished that. And after that ceremony, I just felt unconcerned about all of the little dramas and things that were happening around me. And it doesn't mean that I don't feel stress anymore. But when it arrives, it's like, oh yeah, it's just stress again. And it just brushes off straight away. And quickly. And so, as I said, I've been working with all these plants ever since they arrived and they called my attention. And I'm very grateful, for this honor to be able to be looked after and cared by them, because they have a lot to give us, not just in terms of nurturing and nourishment and medicine and food, but also like a spiritual nourishment and emotional care. And the food is not just for the mind and the body, but is for the heart as well. And it feels really good. And I cannot even imagine my life differently now.
So when you're in ceremony with plants and you're receiving these messages, or when the plants kind of help to guide you to understand that plant science would be your next step and how you would continue your scientific career, how do you get a sense of what's coming from the wisdom of the plants and what might be within you? Or does it even matter? Or is it all the same?
Yeah, it's a good question. Of course, at the beginning, when all this kind of started, I was like, I'm going mad. And I think anybody who is engaging with these spaces should consider the idea that maybe they're just going mad. It's a good thing. It's a good check, because then you actually know that you're not, and it's very clear that you're not. And what you learn, I think, straight away, that was the first thing that I learned really clearly. It was there are different voices. And the voice of your mind, at least my mind, I should talk about myself. My voice, the voice of my mind has a particular flavor, has a particular timbre, has a particular quality. And what my mind shares with me, and that internal dialogue, is often quite useless, I have to say. It's repetitive. I'm sure many of us have experienced this. Like, your mind can go on and on and on about stuff that doesn't actually matter. And whenever something happens, it latches on and it makes this new story about it, but always based on the past, always based on what has already been experienced, or maybe what is going to be happening in the future based on that still of the past. And there's nothing actually new ever in what the mind really has got to say. Now, it doesn't mean that the mind is not important, but the experience of hearing the other part, the other voice, and that is the voice that comes from the heart, and which is much softer. It's not boisterous. It's not trying to overcome or overpower anything or anyone. It's just like it's waiting. And when the space is open, it delivers. And I guess ceremony and ritual do that, allow for that space to be open so that the mind can quiet itself down, and then you can hear the voice of the heart. And then you can learn the difference between the two. And when the heart is the one that is inspiring, whether it is through your own self-expression or in the interaction with these other spaces and other beings, like plants, for example, then the mind is very useful, because then the mind just wants something to do. And if the heart is not telling the mind what to do, the mind will make up something and it will do that. And I think most of us go around doing that. But if you give the space, lots of space, to your heart to speak and listen to that, then the mind is quite happy to follow the instructions that come from the heart. And I think the plants work in the same space. So the plants are working through your heart, and it's that information, and then the mind is quite happy to engage with and in. And actually, if anything, I find that it feels very excited, because it is something new, that it wasn't the same that was coming from the past that he already knows. And so actually all of you becomes more integrated and happier, I guess, because every part of you has a job, and it feels like it's fulfilling a purpose. And whether, to answer specifically your question, whether it is the plant talking or yourself talking to yourself, well, in the space of the heart, it doesn't really matter who is talking. Like I receive, not just in ceremony, I hear the plants talking many times, and often I'm taken by surprise. That's how I know that it's not me, because there are things that I really don't know anything about. And it's like, how could I ever know about this? It's like, I don't know anything about this. So this information is not mine. I don't know it. And And again, you then learn through those moments to fine tune what voice is speaking. But even said that, when I say the plants are talking to me, it's true. And they talk to many of us, by the way. So I receive so many emails from people saying, oh, me too. And finally, I feel like I can actually say it. And it's like, oh, good, go say it. Because if you talk to any kid, they would actually probably ask you, what do you mean you can't do it? So it's our heritage, it's our natural way of being. And our society, at least Western model society, somehow has vilified this part of us so that we don't engage. But it's just, we all come with this, and then we learn not to. And that's the only real drama, that we learn not to. And instead now we have to unlearn to do what we're doing so that we can do that again. But in terms of, at least from my experience, in terms of like whether is it really the plant talking or it's just yourself or whatever, is that, well, what is talking is actually not me and not the plant. What is talking is, I would say, for a lack of a better word, is that essence, is life, is some might want to call it consciousness. I don't know how to call it, but is that essence that actually is in everything. Another way to maybe describe it is the soul that moves and it's inhabiting everywhere and everything, and it just materializes itself in different forms, but it's the same of the same. So from that perspective, then there is no plant and there is no me. There is just that essence that is basically expressing through the plants or myself. And he's having a grand joke about playing with this.
So can you tell us more about plant cognition, what it means and what you've discovered?
Ooh, that's another big question, I guess, because as you might be aware, these words are causing a lot of trouble for some people, especially those that are very much embedded in a more traditional way of doing science and seeing science as separate from the rest of the bodies of knowledge. And so cognition is often the realm, well, it started as being the realm of psychology, and then often now it's becoming more the realm of neuroscience. And so the narrower the field, the narrower is the definition that we are happy to accept as cognition. And so when I use that word, some colleagues are a bit freaked out because they don't recognize what cognition is and what it's got to do with plants, because the plants don't have a brain or don't have a neural system, and they're not the only one who in that form, in that way. So for some colleagues, having plant and cognition in the same sentence seems to be an oxymoron. It just doesn't make any sense. But the way in which I work with cognition of plants, and not just plants, but in general, non-neural systems, so systems that do not have brains or neurons, is from the etymology of the word, because cognition just comes from its root is about like to know. And to know means that you have to perceive, you have to be able to discriminate, you have to make choices, you have to make decisions, solve problems. And so learning and memory become fundamental for any of those. And these are all processes. They are under a bigger process of the cognitive process. So the big difference in my work, I guess, that I take cognition as a process, and instead cognition is often thought of as contingent to particular structures, material structures. So if you don't have a brain, you cannot do the cognition thing. But that's the key. It's like cognition is not a thing. It's not a trait. It's not a property of the organism, but it's a process that the organism engages with. And that changes a lot the story, because then suddenly it doesn't really matter what kind of organism we're looking at. It's more about what do you do to do what you do. So if a plant or a sponge or an amoeba or a bacterium can do certain things that we only think, an animal or even more specifically a human can do, if when we talk about the human, we talk about cognition, then if the other critter ticks all the boxes, they are cognitive agent too. And so some of the work that I did with the plants to start with was very much asking those questions, because definition define not only what we mean, but also what we are allowed to ask. And so if you think that cognition refers to the attributes of an organism with a brain or a neurosystem, then you will never be able to ask that question in relation to plants because they don't have the structures. So asking the question is already disruptive. And then what happens when you ask some question is that often you find really interesting stuff. And what I found was like that, well, in the case of the mimosa, which was one of the first few studies that I did, this plant is able to do the most basic form of learning and remember for a long time. And I was talking to a young colleague just a few weeks ago, and he has replicated the entire study and extended it a bit. And he was just excited because I found exactly the same patterns that you're describing. So that's really great. And similarly, the other study that I did with a more recent study was with the garden pea, and showing how this plant can learn, given the opportunity. It can show us that the plant can learn just like the dog in the Pavlov experiment, which is a famous experiment where, Pavlov was ringing a bell that didn't have any meaning to the dog, and then offering dinner straight after. And after a few of those bells, the dog started to associate the two. And he was like, oh, okay, so every time that the guy is ringing the bell, my food is coming. And then eventually, Pavlov, the name of the scientist that did the experiment, after a while, by just playing or ringing just the bell, it would get the dog all excited because, of course, there was this expectation. But the idea that there is this association between something that doesn't have any meaning to something that means a lot. So the bell doesn't have any meaning, then food means a lot. And then the bell acquire this meaning through experience, which is learning. That is what we call associative learning. And that's exactly what my plants did too, my peas. So if the peas are able to do this, then, well, what is the difference between the learning of the dog and the learning of a pea? At the process level, there is no difference. At the structural level, yes, of course, a dog has a brain and is engaging in that process by using the brain. And a plant doesn't have a brain, so it must be engaging in a different way. Why should we not be interested, excited, inspired to see how the same task can be achieved and successfully arrived to in different ways? Very different ways. And ultimately, isn't that what I guess we are all aspiring to in terms of problem solving? We have big problems at the global level, and we are trying to resolve them with the things that we already know, because we're not prepared to ask questions that we can't even think of. And that's the challenge. But to be able to do that, you need to really surrender what you think you know and allow for what you don't know to arise and be comfortable with that. And I guess really that's what I've learned mostly with my work, to be comfortable with not knowing. Not knowing is good. It's not about having to fill the space with all this knowledge and stamps collection of information. If anything, the more I worked within this field, the more I feel like I'm forgetting a lot of what I knew, so that there is more space, I guess, and more opening to allow for what I don't know to arise. And I just started this brand new big program, which I was very lucky to receive funding from the Templeton World Charity Foundation. And the program, the entire program is about exploring exactly this, exploring, intelligence, so cognition, learning, all of these processes in organisms that by nature don't have a brain, and see what do they do, how do they do it, what can they do, and is there anything that we can learn that could actually inspire us to do things in a very different way that we haven't conceived of, because we've been so focused on how we operate.
Can you give us a short little description of your sweet peas and how they learned, for people who might not be familiar with the experiment?
Yeah, sure. Just like for Pavlov, how Pavlov had this bell in the dinner, for my peas, of course, the peas don't care about dinner like the dog, but they care about light, which is dinner for the pea. So in my experiment, the bell was substituted with a little fan, and the dinner was substituted with light, blue light specifically. And just like for the dog, I would have the fan blowing gently, followed immediately by the light, the blue light, and they were placed inside a maze so that they had to choose which way to go. And so I repeatedly presented these two fan light in different combinations throughout the experiment. And the idea was like, can the plants, once I only give the fan, can the plants understand what the fan is about and make decision based on that? And what we find is like, oh yeah, they can. They can, quite clearly they can. So that is very exciting because, again, as I said, they don't have brains. So how is this decision making coming about, and how can we learn about solving problem and making decision which does not necessarily work as we have understood it until now?
Amazing.
I know, again, in this context, that there is a group of scientists, small group of scientists who have been quite aggressive, actually, and not necessarily very precise in their scholarship, I have to say, who are trying everything to do everything that they can to kind of dismiss and make this work, not just mine, but the work in this area, look very flawed and very disconnected from what is true science. And I find it very sad because, first of all, as I said, the scholarship is quite poor and it's all about opinions, and I haven't seen any of that data. And the little bit of data that one young student presented was unfortunately so flawed in the design that it doesn't actually mean anything. And so there's been a lot of that. But I think as well, again, this is a good sign. It's in a way, it's annoying, but it's kind of welcome, because we wouldn't expect old ideas and old patterns to just disappear because suddenly we show something different. So it's good. We know what the system is at, and we know that actually this is a small group. And so it's a good sign. The change is going to take over and it will be relatively quick. And I know from colleagues around the world that other people are working on this, and they have found similar patterns in very different systems, as I have observed. So it's the change is, as I said at the beginning, the change has already happened. And before you actually see it, it's been going for a while. So I think, the change has already occurred, and the shift in a paradigm that need desperately to shift has already happened. Now we're just having to manifest it.
If you enjoy Going Conscious, please subscribe for a new episode every Wednesday. If you think your friends and networks would benefit from listening, please share this podcast of fulfillment and freedom with them. And if you listen on Apple Podcasts, please rate and review. It's great to read what you think, and your support makes a big difference. Together, let's grow our courage and tools to transform and live the lives we really want to. As well as creating Going Conscious, I work as a transformation coach and conscious brand consultant. I'm on a mission to help holistically maximize conscious entrepreneurs to drive positive changes for themselves, others, and the planet. I can help you to transition and level up personally, and I can help your brand grow and make a bigger impact. To connect with me and find out more about how we can work together, find me on Instagram @NikkiTrott or on my website, nikkitrott.com. Please get in touch. I'd love to hear from you, and let's talk about your path of growth and development. So you've discovered that plants can remember and learn and communicate. Why do you think humans find this hard to accept or tend to underestimate plants more generally?
Because we're so self-obsessed or so anthropocentric and so focused on us as the template for, this is how things are working at the best in our system, in our body, in our way. And so we don't appreciate it. We cannot see the others. And, but, really, if one just stop and think of a very simple process that we do every day, we have to eat every day, right? Otherwise we die. And we have to go about and kill other things, so that we can sustain this body. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's like, we are doing what our biology is designed to do, basically. Plants make their own food by just sunbaking. How good is that? Like, really, if there was a model that was really amazing, well, plants, I think, are amazing. They do so much of this crazy stuff that is like, can you make your own food? can you provide the breathing oxygen for the entire world, for all the species that need it? Can you do that? So, and you do it without a brain. Maybe the brain is just simply overrated. Maybe the brain is a very costly thing that many other systems, the majority actually of the biological systems, don't even bother evolving to, because it just costs so much and there is probably no need. For plants, for example, if the brain was to support, say, fast movement, because that's one of the things that we do relatively. But, for animals with a big brain, there is a lot of movement and body activity. Well, plants have just bypassed it. It's like, oh, we don't need to move that much. We just do things slow. And we're going to be here 800 years. When you will be gone forever and ever, and generation of you have come and gone, and we'll be watching. So I don't know. It's like, what kind of strategy do we apply to our biology, and what kind of strategy they have applied to their biology? I don't know. We are so, again, we're so obsessed with like eternal life, youth forever. And plants are just like, yeah, I got time and I'm going to be here for a very long time. So by the time the 3 generations of yours have passed, I'm still young.
What does that teach us?
Well, I would say humbleness. It should inspire humbleness and awe, because to even consider, I don't think that many of us, again, I should talk for myself, but if I try to think what it means to be alive for a century, I already find that difficult. And when we have people who live like 100 years, we think that that's already, oh my God, incredible. And but can you imagine several centuries, even millennia? What does that mean to be alive for that long? It just, my mind cannot comprehend actually what that means. The numbers are just too big. The time, it's beyond my time scale. So I cannot appreciate. I can understand it like conceptually, but actually I don't understand it really. So it's just a very interesting thing that we are so, again, self-centered, so constrained within our timeline, for example, that we are not even able to conceive what it means to be alive for that long. And if you were to have a little glimpse of what that could even possibly mean, you will have to be humbled by the smallness of your life, really, compared to those that live for millennia. And then you will be in awe, because it's like, wow, how incredible is that? And the last thing that you would do is to cut them down, which is what we do. And that just shows that we have understood nothing.
So, talking of understanding, you have pioneered a new research field, bioacoustics, demonstrating that plants have their own voices and that they detect and respond to sounds in their environments. Sounds absolutely fascinating. Can you tell us a little bit more about it?
Yeah, well, I can actually tell you that I am about to engage in some really exciting research in the context of sound with plants, and not only plants. And with colleagues who are amazing eco-acoustic people, and the idea is to actually engage with what other critters, plants and other critters, listen to, and it's important to them, and what the environment around them provides them with in terms of like bioacoustically speaking, and then see if we can use that in terms of regeneration for the planet. And I've been having some very, very exciting meetings about this, and I feel so ready to try and see what it means to really, really give voices to those that we have silenced for so long and pretended that they don't have a voice, and now their voices can actually save this place from complete collapse if we don't cut them down all at once, if we give ourselves a little bit of time to actually slow down and listen. And I guess I really appreciate that for many people around the world, this crisis with the COVID virus has been terrifying and terrible and painful. But I cannot help but thinking what an amazing, incredible opportunity that humanity had to slow down, had to stop, and how many of us have gone out, actually not out, but in, have gone in. And the outcome of that has been like there are a lot of people have started planting veggie gardens or little plants in pots in their balconies, and everyone is reaching out to nature because we know that that's the only thing that actually nurtures us. That's the only thing that in the end really, really matters. And so I think, again, I as I said, I feel for all of those who are suffering, but at the same time, I feel that this is growth pains. We need them so badly. And this virus, in a way, has been an incredible blessing because it has forced the world to stop for a while. And to wish that we go back to normal is madness. We're moving forward, and hopefully the voices of many others will join us, and we will listen, and they'll teach us what it is that we can do with this space, because we inhabit it with all of them. It's a cohabitation. It's not like overpowering of the others, which is what we've been doing for the last few centuries. But I think it has to change, obviously. And I think, again, the change has already arrived, and it's a good change, hopefully.
How has discovering plant communication and memory changed your life personally?
I think I became more porous and more, my boundaries with the world around me are less fixed, I guess. And so my science also. And I guess the major thing is that while I realized in hindsight, of course, while I had so much fear of, being and doing the right thing and all of that kind of stuff, which we are taught from the beginning when we start schooling and probably even before, which suffocate the imagination. And what that science has forced me to do is to embrace the imagination, and actually, why not go even a little further and go wilder with it? And so, like that science and those experiments have, again, have kind of given me, as well as the many people who write to me, the liberty, the freedom to just express exactly what we are experiencing. And the fact that, these others that are co-inhabiting this place with us are very much like alive, present. They got their own thing going. They are listening. They're talking. They are thinking. They're remembering us. And how much better the world is with that. So if anything, I feel inspired.
And how does breaking down these boundaries between plants and animals impact our perception of humanity then?
Same as above. There is no boundary, really. So, they're just forms. And it's good. We need to, our mind likes to categorize things, and that's great. It's just as long as the categorization doesn't become a mean to colonize the space of others. And that's what we have been doing, but that doesn't have to be. And hopefully by blurring the boundaries, we realize that. And then we can just say, oh, they're just a continuum. They're just an happy continuum. So why not take it that way? And then some of the behaviors that we apply to our world would be just like, we just wouldn't do that. There's some things that we do that are totally about using and abusing others that we just wouldn't do. So probably it's going to make us better humans.
So when we reconsider plants like this, what are the ethical considerations?
The ethics is another big question because, when I started, I was thinking like, the question of ethics is about giving rights to the plants so that they have the same legal rights as other people in a court of law, and then we can protect them that way. But I'm kind of changing my mind, not because I don't think that the plants should be protected legally, actually quite the contrary, but I find that is it's still too small, and it's still trying to use a broken system to fix the problem, and instead it's like we just need a different system. So instead of trying to fix a system that is broken, I'm trying to think with the plants and other spaces where we can create a totally different system that doesn't even need to conceive of having plant rights, because it doesn't need to. And I guess from that perspective, and again, I'm very respectful, and hopefully it's very clear that It's not about appropriation of knowledge and wisdom, but I guess what I'm trying to learn is to apply a more animist methodology, a more indigenous-like approach, and where it is understood that everyone has a right to be here, and you don't need to give the right. You have a right because you are here. And so let's move from that point, instead of really questioning whether plants should have rights. Like, they have rights because they're here. And without them, many of us, well, all of us wouldn't be here. So let's take that as a point, as a matter of fact, and let's move on instead of wasting time trying to decide whether they should have rights or not. Because actually that doesn't matter. That's, redundant.
Mm-hmm.
So the ethics, I guess, is in the same space. It's like, ethical behavior is a very human thing, and we need rules to tell us what the ethical behavior is, because we think that without it we don't know. But that's not true. That's not true. And for millennia, we have had rules that kind of guide our conduct, I guess, towards other humans and other people that are non-human people. And it becomes very clear within a particular way of understanding the world that, but of course, it's a matter of, but of course, you wouldn't do that or that, because you're respecting and honoring the space of the other, whatever form it is. And again, this is a very indigenous-like view of the world. And I'm hoping, in a way, to learn more from all the indigenous people that are still with us, because they actually have, I think that they've been incredible in holding a vision for the world that it's really needed. And it's hopefully time to bring it out. And despite all that they had to, endure, they're still holding it. They're still holding this knowing and this way of being, which we really need right now. So it's exciting.
So much wisdom. So as I deepen my connection with plants and learn much more about them and see their aliveness in a totally new way, I feel really weird about picking flowers. I feel like I should be fully respecting the other plant, and I don't like picking flowers anymore, or to kind of touch plants in a way that I think is seeing them just as an object. And I just wondered what you think about that. Because, of course, I'm vegan, but of course I'm aware that I am eating plants, and I'm very grateful and thankful for them. And that relationship kind of has to exist. But I'm not sure where the line is.
Well, again, it's like it's all about the approach, I think, and the way in which we are being with the other. And I'm vegan myself too, and of course my diet is pretty much only plants. So I just feel that it's not about, so now you can't eat this plant or this fruit, because that's got nothing to do with ethics, and it's got nothing to do with like right or wrong or any of that stuff. For me, it's like, how do you eat? Are you grateful that a plant has just offered that for you to make your body? And the plant actually doesn't go anywhere, because it's been, integrated into your body, and it is exactly the very thing that makes your body. So if you really stop and think about that, then you realize as well that you and the plant are actually one and the same, because literally the plant is making your body. And if you're vegan and most of the stuff that you eat is plant material, then I would say that you're very much like mostly plant.
I feel weird about, just picking a flower or pulling a bit off a plant without thinking, or something like that, just kind of pointlessly. So that's what I feel weird about sometimes now, is it right to just kind of pluck flowers because, oh, look at this one, pull it off and then throw it on the floor 5 minutes later, rather than, of course, this relationship with food is very different.
Yeah.
But I've just started to be so much more conscious of those kinds of actions now, and notice myself grimacing a bit when people are maybe, not looking at the plant like it is a living creature.
That's right. So that's exactly what you just explained and described is exactly what I'm talking about. It's like this way of being brings attention, and it brings a different kind of attention to the world around you. And so when I pick my tomatoes from my garden, because at the moment they're everywhere, I'm like, oh my God, you are just looking so good. And when, of course, then I go and make my little salad and I eat them, it's like I know exactly the story that I'm eating, and it feels good, and I'm feeling grateful, and I feel lucky that I am in a place where tomatoes are growing. They can make my salad, and I think that connection with food it can be a good place to start. But even with flowers, it's like flowers are beautiful. And so if a plant can offer flowers to bring beauty, and beauty is a very good medicine. So if you can bring beauty to somewhere or something, why not? But again, you can ask. Is it okay if I'm gonna take some flowers and I'm gonna put them on my altar? And we're having a ceremony, and I would like for you to be present with us. And I'll bring your flowers and your leaves on the altar. I had plans sometimes that say, no, don't want you to pick me. And then I don't. But most of the time it's like, oh, yes, please. So, but again, it's the attention, it's the intention that matters. And I guess that's with everything that we do.
So how can we connect more deeply with plants, maybe for our listeners and people who aren't so deep into this topic and learning?
Well, as you know, just before we started the conversation officially, we were talking about, spending time in nature, and how spending more time just deepens your relationship with. That's easy. We just need to spend more time. Slow down, spend more time, quality time. And it can just be even a park. It doesn't have to be the national park, blah, blah, but it can be just a normal park just down the road from you. Or it can just be the one tree on the side of the road with, in the middle of a city. It doesn't have to be anything special, because actually, even as a tree completely covered and surrounded by concrete in the middle of a city, ultimately its roots are down into the ground that is the same ground that it's, in my veggie patch, is the same ground that is in the national park. And so to connect with a tree in particular and plants allows you to actually put your own roots down, and tap into the space that is where we live, all of us. And it doesn't matter what we cover it with. I mean, it does matter, but really doesn't matter. It's still there. Our planet is, it's alive, and it's still there. And so you can connect with that space anywhere.
So I'm conscious of time, but there's a few questions I want to quickly ask you before we wrap up. So I would love to hear a little bit about your experiences with shamanism and how science and shamanism can complement each other.
Well, if shamanism is another way to talk about animist approaches, then it's quite simple. Like it allows a new science to emerge, which actually is an old science, but a new science for our time, where there are no objects and knowledge is not fabricated or constructed as we are doing now, but is allowed to emerge from the space between the different beings in the picture, including the environment itself. And so by bringing the two together, it brings a very different approach to knowing. And I guess it's closer to wisdom than knowledge. And that can only be good.
You mentioned earlier in our conversation a 10-day meditation silent retreat, and I'm wondering if it was a Vipassana retreat, because
it was.
I did one. Yes, I thought it must be. I did a Vipassana retreat, which for those who aren't familiar, it's a 10-day silent meditation retreat, and I did it in New Zealand, and I have never felt more connected to the trees, where I would take walks in the breaks and just feel like the vibrations coming from them. And I haven't experienced that again since, and that's something I'm really looking forward to in the next Vipassana meditation course that I do. So I wonder how that also helped you to see and feel more from plants.
Absolutely. I started, I used to do a Vipassana, the retreat every year. And then during the year, I used to maintain the practice. So I would be sitting every day, morning and evening, for an hour. And and that was even way earlier on. So by the time I had to switch over from my fish work to my plant work, I had already done several years of that. And I'm almost certain that without that, I don't think if my spirit would have been developed enough to actually, dive into that change that was obviously coming, and I was ready, basically. And then I recently last year, I think this time last year, I went for the last retreat, and at the moment it's been a bit difficult because of COVID, and it was amazing. Yeah, it's always amazing to be able to have the luxury, because it's a luxury, to take 10 days in which everything for you is looked after, and all is required of you is to just sit in silence with yourself. And then once you are there, you can hear everyone else. And so your experience with the tree doesn't surprise me at all. Yeah, it's highly recommended.
I think it's impossible to overstate how powerful the Vipassana meditation retreat is. And for me, was the most powerful experience I've ever had, I think.
Yeah, I agree.
So what does personal success look like to you? And how has this maybe changed from when you started your science career?
Well, my personal success is exactly where I am now. And I should qualify more, is as the cacao told me a few months ago, I am unconcerned, and hence I can only be successful at any time, because I am unconcerned about the outcome. I am unconcerned about the what is coming next and what is going to happen, and that actually frees up the energy, my passion, to do exactly what is needed. So I give up my purpose to find purpose. I give up my drive and passion to find passion. And so I give up the idea of personal success, and then I feel totally in line with exactly what I've come to do. And that's my success. And so I guess anybody would have their own personal success if they only allow it to be. And allow it to be means that you have to let it go, which of course is a paradox, but isn't a paradox this place anyway? So
I really feel that resonating very deeply, those words. Thank you, Monica. Is there a key takeaway or message that you'd like to share with everybody as a closing comment?
I'm going to plagiarize my cacao conversation. These are like, I wasn't the one that said this, but we had a ceremony just a couple of days ago, and the last one for the year. And the cacao asked me, "Where do you live?" And I'm like, "Here." No, where do you live? And then I felt my attention moving from my head to my heart, and my heart became very strong and very warm, and also like I could feel the heartbeat very clearly. And it was like, we told you many times before that this is where you live. And I was like, oh yeah, that's right. And so the cacao was like, remember, we also said your heart's got eyes, and if you look through those eyes, you will only see beauty. So this is where you live. Can you do that? And I was like, oh, okay. So yeah, that's my message.
Amazing.
Which is not mine, but hey, I'm sure the cacao doesn't mind.
I'm sure. Thank you so much for sharing. And is there a book that you've read recently and loved?
Actually, there is a book that I am reading. I just started it, and I feel very excited. I just read the first few pages, and I was like, oh, wow, this is going to be good. And it's called Research is Ceremony by Sean Wilson. And this is a Cree man from Canada. And yeah, to in a way, answering to your question before, like when you bring shamanism or indigenous approaches, I would say, and science together, what does it come out? Research, how does research will look like when it's done from an indigenous perspective? And the book is, I read similar books before. The book is actually circular, so it feels like you're going around and around and around, and then you like from a Western mind perspective, it feels like, yeah, but where is the point? Where are we going? But you had to go with that, and you had to relinquish. It's a great book to show you how the only way to read it is for you to let go of the idea that you're going to find something, and then you will. And so, yeah, I'm going to enjoy that.
Amazing. And lastly, where's the best place for listeners to find you online, Monica?
Oh, I guess my website, maybe, www.monicagagliano.com. That's where I put, all of the new writings and whatever it is that I'm doing. And if I'm participating in events or that kind of stuff, I'll try to keep it updated and posted there. And and I already apologize in advance. I always try to reply to as many emails as I can. And sometimes I take ages. And sometimes, unfortunately, I don't get to it. And it's not because I don't want to. It's just sometimes I really just can't get to it.
Thank you so much, Monica. It's been such a pleasure speaking to you today.
No, thank you, Nikki, for the opportunity, I guess. Yeah, it's been good.
I hope you enjoyed this episode with Monica as much as I did. I think it's incredible to see how Monica challenges the old views and brings so many fields together with her scientific work. My own journey over recent years of leaving big cities of London and Berlin and spending much more time connected with nature, combined with reading and learning about plants and specifically my love of trees, has really transformed how I feel about the world around me. This, of course, changes my perspective of life completely. I used to feel more disconnected from plant life and to see them more as just objects, labelled by the names we give them, judged against the sensual pleasures they evoke in us. But understanding the aliveness of plants and starting to tap into the consciousness we share has made me move around this beautiful planet in a different way. I'm still really only at the beginning of this journey myself, and I'm sure many more wonderful things will open up. And I hope that you find some opening up from this conversation. I love how Monica talks about asking the plants before taking from them. I think this brings meaningful awareness and gratitude to our actions. I'm definitely going to try it. I was interested in how Monica described how she gave up purpose to find purpose, a sense that when we stop trying, the truth emerges. I think this can apply to most people on our journeys to our purpose. It goes back to that important mindset again, surrender. Surrendering to my journey was a huge part of how I was able to connect with my purpose personally too. How are you surrendering? If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe now. And if you're on Apple Podcasts, please leave a 5-star rating and short review. If you think people you know might benefit from listening to Going Conscious, please share it with them. I know I get much of my inspiration from podcasts which are shared with me. For all episodes, our library and more, visit goingconscious.com. Your support to spread this positive message of fulfillment and freedom means so much. As well as hosting Going Conscious, I help conscious entrepreneurs to transition and unleash their power and purpose with my transformation coaching and conscious brand consulting work. Discover more on Instagram @NikkiTrott or on my website, nikkitrott.com. I'd love to hear from you and to talk about your goals, questions, or how we can work together. And if I don't hear from you before then, see you next Wednesday on the next episode of Going Conscious. As always, live your freedom.